Chennai. Good morning, everybody. First of all, thank you all for coming for the second Developer Day at Chennai. We did one last year. Big round of applause to all those who came, made the effort, reaching here early morning. Thank you so much. Um, so our idea of Developer Days is basically to help build local communities. I must tell you, we started the Developer Day last year in Chennai, and it translated into a WhatsApp group, which then became active a year later. But uh, the idea is to basically build local communities. We as IGDC, we are 16 years old as a gaming conference, but more than that, we've helped act as a conduit for the game industry in India. And we'd like to continue doing that by going to cities that we normally do not go to. So last year we did 3 cities, this year we're doing 7 cities. Our idea is to go to different cities, offer market insights, get people who have had skin in the game for a long time to come share their experiences, insights, give business and monetization insights to developers, young developers, speak about experience of what they went through, what they did right, what they did wrong, and basically inspire the community to start building together. The greatest thing with the games industry, I feel, is that everybody is approachable. Nobody is bigger than the other. Monetarily, people might be at different points in terms of companies, but I think everybody in the gaming industry is very approachable. So for all the young ones here, students looking for a career in game development or people who are trying to establish something, please network. The name in the game is network. Like, you have to network. You're here. You're getting like people who've spent a long time in the games industry under one roof, and you're getting the undivided attention. So I'd say please network. All these talks are going to be on YouTube by tomorrow or the after the most, so you can go back and listen to the talks. But please network. We've got a very stellar lineup of speakers through the day. Before I start off, I also like to thank IITM for providing us this facility. I'd like to thank our sponsors, Nazara, our diamond sponsor, who've been big supporters of IGDC over the years. I'd also like to thank our gold sponsor, MPL. We start off today with a talk by Saikat Mondal from VP at Nazara. The title is Emerging Trends in Gaming. Over to you, Saikat.
Hey guys, hi, good morning. It's very good to be here. I'm Saikat. I'm the Vice President of Mergers and Acquisitions and Investments at Nazara Technologies. Nazara, as you may know, is India's only listed gaming entity. We have our franchise portfolio products in esports, in games, in adtech, and the likes of them. Some of the notable franchises you may know is World Cricket Championship. The next wave team based out of the homegrown Chennai is here as well. We have Comic Con India, Nordven, Sportskeeda, Kidopia, Animal Jam, just to name a few of the IPs that we have. I've been with Nazara for the last 2 years, but predominantly from mobile gaming space with Glue Mobiles, EA, Garena, and the likes of it, looking at strategy, M&A, and corp dev. The reason we have gathered here today, and this particular talk is really close to my heart. This essentially is expected to give you a broad overview of the entire gaming ecosystem, where we are, and not just looking at some of the specific platforms like mobile, PC, and console, but also look at the wider picture on payments ecosystem, on discovery, on social networking and social gaming, and how do we sort of explore. It's going to be a little data heavy, but do not get bogged down by the data. You would have access to the presentation at the end of the presentation. The data is supposed to sort of help you establish the broader picture so that you can understand where we are headed towards. Just to structure the conversation in this presentation into 2 parts. The first part will focus on what happened in 2023, which will eventually help us to establish where we currently are, and then eventually shifting our focus to 2024 and beyond, and what we can expect from the industry as a trend, as an overall trends. Right, so as you may know, gaming overall globally is larger than books, movies, music, all of these other larger formats of media combined. In India, we do not see that the case as yet, but globally that is indeed the case, and gaming has always remained larger than all of these 3 media formats combined. The other interesting bit is it has always seen increase in its overall traction. So if you look at on the right hand side of the presentation, 2020 was a very peculiar year. There was shelter in place, COVID happened, a lot of people had a lot of free time, and they just did not know what to do, and they were gaming quite a lot. But eventually, as we go forward to 2023 and 2022, that baseline that we established in COVID in 2020 has not diminished. Although there are some headwinds in terms of overall macro environments, funding, IDFA, and other things, which has pushed the revenue from 2021 levels, but we have never really seen a decline below the COVID baseline of $178 billion. Eventually, we also estimate that by 2025, we will reach the $200 billion mark, and that's an amazing news for the overall ecosystem. Of the major markets, if you look at the trends, Middle East and Africa is the highest growth geography from the entire overall gaming landscape. Now, this graph includes all PC, console, and mobile platforms combined. Latin America is the second biggest market. North America, although it has registered some growth, but the growth, overall percentage of growth has tapered down in 2023, and eventually going forward also we believe that the growth rate will not be as high as Middle East, Africa, and Latin America. India is also one of those high growth gaming geographies where the consumer sentiments, consumer markets, perception, in-app purchases all are on the rise. India, for your information, became the #1 country last year, which added the most number of paying users globally, which is a great sign for Indian consumers. So if you are a developer who is building for the emerging markets, some of these markets is something where you can identify your white space and start developing your products specifically for those markets. One notable example would be Gameberry, which is a homegrown example. They built a Ludo game specifically for India, but then eventually moved to Europe and Middle Eastern markets where they are getting a lot of traction, and not India, which is not their primary market today from a revenue standpoint. From a total revenue by platform and number of players, 2023 sort of remained flat on both these benchmarks. So $184 to $184 billion in overall revenues, and 4.4 billion players to 4.4 billion players in 22 versus 23 as well. The interesting thing to note is on mobile, which is typically the platform of choice for all emerging markets, including Middle East, Africa, Latin America, India, Southeast Asia, all of these markets, we have grown 200 million new gamers, which is an amazing sign for some of these newer geographies. And eventually we'll see some of these trends and these geographies which are adding new players would be a good consumer markets as well. When it comes to free-to-play on mobile, the Western markets are probably one of the largest markets. So that includes US, UK, Germany, France, and Spain. I think these are the top 5 biggest markets in the West. If you look at the 4 top genres, Match 3 is definitely the #1 genre. Social casino is the second strategy, and RPG are the other 2 genres where a lot of revenue is being currently driven. If you look at the overall trend, what excites me in 2023 is the fact that Coin Master Monopoly Go was launched in the month of April of 2023, and midway it has already toppled, midway through the year in June, July, it has already toppled the #1 player in its own segment on social and casual casino, which is Monopoly Go. Now Monopoly Go, as you all may be aware, that it is one of the largest mobile gaming product in its segment. And any newcomer to come and beat the existing player and take the top throne consistently for 7-8 months in 2023 after launch, that shows the power of innovation in mobile is still available. So if you are having a unique core loop, a good social mechanics, and a good thesis for your overall product, giving the users what they need, you potentially could still cater to the market despite the competition that we otherwise see. The other interesting thing that happened in 2023 was, for the first time ever since launch, Candy Crush was overthrown by Royal Match. So it has been a decade where Candy Crush was the #1 game in mobile ever. That was the first time that a Royal Match, a newcomer, I mean it has launched for the last 3-4 years now, but still a newcomer has been able to beat Candy Crush's overall revenue levels. That essentially shows that a good IP, a good game, a good social mechanic, something that users are craving for, if you are building some of those products, you still can rule the market, even with higher competition. Shifting our gears a little, focusing on the PC console market, it's a big market, $93 billion of overall global revenues, being dominated primarily by APAC and North America, which contributes 1/3 each. Again, dominated by 2 primary countries, US in North America and China in APAC, contributing roughly around 70-80% of the $31 billion. That's sort of the overall market scape, but LATAM, Middle East, Europe are also some of the interesting geographies that ideally we should look at from the interesting trends perspective and building games for those geographies and those users as well. The interesting thing in 23 was the emergence of live services games on PC console platform. Now, PC console has been typically a late adopter of live services game, unlike mobile games are all on a premium basis. But if you look at the 2023 launches on PC and console, 59% of all the revenues from the games that were launched in 2023 were derived from live services pay-to-play model, which essentially shows the importance and the growing importance of free-to-play or live services models on PC console as a platform as well. From an overall monetization standpoint, premium is still the largest, which contributes roughly around, on PC contributes 56%, on console it contributed 57%. But free-to-play is again emerging as an interesting model in both the platforms. The interesting thing on PC is if you look at DLCs, their contribution in 23 rose. That's primarily on account of companies focusing a lot of efforts on the already launched and successful titles and how to keep the content funnel going, which is also a testament to the fact that if the game is live services or operated on a live services model, the potential for or chances for success of those games and those IPs typically would be higher. Now, that was sort of what happened in 2023 for both the platforms on PC, console, as well as mobile. Focusing on what would eventually happen. Now, simple framework of what could happen based on some of the trends that we're already seeing in the market is basically relying on two key factors. If you look at the overall evolution of gaming in general, so first we had arcade, which was probably the least democratic format of game distribution and consumption, where you had to go, you had to pay, you had to play, and then you had to come back. So it was riddled with friction, it was riddled with upfront payments, and a lot of other things. Eventually moving our focus to console, early handheld, and PC, where you still had to buy, put an initial investment on, still had to buy games, but you could enjoy it from the convenience of your home. Then came mobile, which made it even more democratic. You don't have to sit at your home to play the games, you can play it anywhere and everywhere. And then came the emerging technology, which is more engrossing, and the free-to-play emergence, which basically made it more democratic. You don't have to download or pay to sort of download the game or install the game and play, to more democratic formats, which is more engaging in and of itself. So AR, VR would be one such example where the games are more engaging. So anything and everything which helps democratize either the distribution or consumption or production. I think these are the three key terms. If these are being democratized, we can assume with a degree of certainty that these technologies would eventually emerge. Taking an example of AR, VR, 7 years back, there was a huge craze that AR, VR would be the next big thing. It took it 7 years and still the market is very nascent compared to the other formats, including PC, console, and mobile. But it is here and we are already seeing the signs of growth. So since it is making the consumption more democratic, more engaging, therefore we believe that going forward, this will be a key trend. Some of the defining elements for the overall gaming universe is, one is social gameplay, user-generated UGC content, so Roblox, Minecraft, Fortnite would be some of those examples. Transmedia integrations, these are the defining elements. Then there is an enabling ecosystem, which is payments ecosystem, cross-platform, VR, cloud, generative AI, and eventually Web3. Looking at each and every one of those elements a little closely, on the social side, there are multiple ways in which you can make your games social. You can take an example from Travis Scott's social space on Fortnite, or Lazy Oafs on Animal Crossing. So these are also one of the social spaces where people can go and hang out together. There are other emerging concepts like play with influencers, sharing game screenshots, being very social in nature. GlipGG, Plight, Tape are probably for some of those great examples. And the last example would be brand marketing. These are not the social mechanics within the game. Social mechanics within the game are probably over and above the social features that you could potentially add or social formats that you could potentially adopt. On the user-generated content side, you have basically two key axes. On the vertical slide, you have the same genre of games, and on the horizontal, you have different genre of games. So if you look at Roll20, which falls on the upper top, essentially that means is it will all be based on dice mechanic. So any of the Dungeons and Dragons, Ludo, all of these games typically would fall under a Roll20 UGC environment. Whereas on the horizontal slide, if you look at Roblox or Fortnite, UEFN universe, these are all very different genre of games that are primarily centered around a particular specific platform. On the horizontal axis, you would have UGC content on the platform side. Essentially what it means is the platform remains the key. The genre of games typically revolve around that platform. And on the game first, you would have a particular core loop where the other elements are surrounding that core loop. So any mod platform is typically would be a game first user generated content. Some good examples would be Minecraft, Halo, which will probably be on the game first side, and then Roblox, which is typically does not have a core game loop or a mechanic. It will be particularly on the platform side. But looking at these elements, you should try and identify what are the various platforms that I could create my next game on. Typically Roblox, UEFN are great examples where you can build games very fast, prototype them. These games have less competition, and you could probably create a multi-million-dollar franchise as all the 19-year-olds are doing on these platforms already. The next big trend is transmedia. Of course, you are all aware of the Fallout series that came on Amazon Prime. Look at the graph that of the MAU based on Steam DB charts. The launch of Amazon series rose the game's traction by 700% in terms of overall MAUs. Now, this is the first example wherein any transmedia activity can promote or engage your overall game. I'm quite excited about the Borderlands, Sonic, Minecraft, Ghost of Tsushima, and what these particular IPs, movies, series will potentially do to their games. But it's a very interesting trend to keep an eye out. Similar was the example with Edge Runners that was based on a Cyberpunk series. It basically helped the company reduce its overall MAU by 250%. Based on Newzoo report, any IP integration is expected to increase your overall MAUs by on an average of 40%. Not all of these IPs are as prominent as Fallout or Ghost of Tsushima and the likes of them, but on average, it is expected to increase your DAUs, MAUs by at least 40%. The other key interesting fact is, of the top 50 games that were launched by PC console based on MAUs, 80% of them were integrated with IP in 2023, which essentially shows that people are finding it incredibly hard to get a good market traction with a valid and a viable GTM strategy, and are relying on already existing and popular IPs to launch their games and make it popular. From a payments ecosystem perspective, if you are not aware, I think web shops and direct-to-consumer models on gaming is getting a lot of traction. Companies like Playtika, Stillfront, Scopely are all generating anywhere between 35% to 50% of all their revenues through off-platform, which essentially means not generating revenues of Google and Apple directly and therefore saving 30% of its overall commissions. That's a significant boost to their bottom line, and this is something that as a small developer, if you are able to save a 15-20% on our overall gross revenues, it's a great incentive for us to go forward and reinvest that money in increasing our overall traction for the game and improve our overall game payments. The other two examples are real-time payments and buy now, pay later. Now, real-time payments, I'm quite excited about it. Google, Apple have already adopted the UPI payments ecosystem in India, but I believe globally India is a market leader and therefore it makes a lot of sense for them to do so. But globally, as we see a lot of these real-time payments getting incorporated, a lot of these real-time payment solutions will eventually get integrated into our games, which makes the gameplay more efficient, and people don't have to wait, input numbers and authorize and authenticate them, and therefore making it much more seamless. Cross-platform is again a very interesting trend. Multiple companies are approaching it very differently. So if you look at Stumble Guys, it started off as a studio based out of Finland, Kitka Games, got acquired by Scopely, and then they launched it on scaled it on mobile. Eventually, after a successful scaling on mobile, they launched it on PC and console platforms as well. On the other hand, Homa typically launched their games on Nintendo Switch only. And the last example here would be Roblox, which launched their game last year on PlayStation, and it is the number 5 game today in just 6-7 months on almost every major country, US, UK, Spain, etc. The number 1 being, of course, Fortnite. So, which really shows the power of increasing your overall target markets just by the virtue of increasing it to other platforms. which is a really powerful way to scale your IP. This was a survey done by Newzoo, of which we could see that just 9% of total console and 8% of overall PC are just building games for only their platforms. Essentially, every single PC console developer is now targeting mobile eventually in their roadmap if the game hits the traction specific numbers on PC and console. Mobile, as I mentioned, there is still a lot of scope of innovation. So a lot of mobile developers are focusing on creating new, unique mobile games as well. Now the audience base is very different. So it is not a very easy one-on-one port between mobile and PC console, as well as the game formats, the free-to-play loops and live services model, all are very different on PC console versus what it looks like on mobile. On the VR side, we are quite bullish about this. We are already seeing 44% CAGR on overall number of VR devices sold till 23 from 21. We see that growth to at least 2x in the next 3-4 years, which is a very good leading indicator of how the consumption market could eventually pan out, just because of the virtue that there are more devices available with people. Cloud gaming, on the other hand, is again a very interesting way to basically use this technology to create your own niche. Essentially what cloud gaming's core proposition is, you don't need to own a device. You don't need to own your platform to enjoy any game anywhere. So if I have a very low-end Android device, I could still play Call of Duty. That's the promise of cloud. Now, what are the type of games, monetization models, distribution, and type of users you select will eventually create your own niche. So you have to see cloud gaming not as a gaming product or a vertical, but as a technology which enables something happen, and that thing is something that you need to define for your own business. Some interesting example is Antstream Arcade, backed by Tencent. What are they doing is they are taking in the legacy catalog, so Legend of Zelda, the Marios of the world, and bringing it onto a new device or a new platform, and you can enjoy it just by streaming it via cloud through their platform. So it's a niche that they have catered to. It's a very strong nostalgia niche that they are catering to, and therefore they are sort of able to capture that market. So it is these niches that you need to identify to sort of succeed in this cloud, but we believe that people will be able to scale games through and distribute games through cloud, which is what now GG and Stream are particularly doing. The last key aspect which I'm quite excited about is generative AI. As a developer, as a producer, you always face the trifecta dilemma, which is you can optimize for the two factors here, but not the third one. So if you factor in cost and time, you cannot reduce the overall scope of the project. Or if you reduce the cost and if you reduce the scope, if you increase the scope, then overall time required would be significantly higher. So you cannot optimize for all these three factors combined together. What generative AI is helping us do is, it is simultaneously helping us to reduce costs, reduce time, and enhance the overall scope, and therefore this is not now a limiting factor for the overall production cycle, and therefore we are quite bullish about the integration of generative AI in the gaming production cycle. The primary reason and the primary way in which we see that this will be enacted is, we can expect a small group of 3, 4, 5 people now creating AAA quality games. Or we could believe that the same type of team are able to create very, very many different concepts, mini games, different core loops and mechanics, rapidly prototyping them and bringing out diverse content for a specific niche of users, similar to how you would see content spaces evolve like YouTube or TikTok, where they're catering to a specific niche continuously and repeatedly. On the evolution side, we are already on the level 4, where the partial generative AI pipeline is currently being deployed, which essentially means that I have 1 or 2 partially automated processes. I still may need some manual interventions towards the very end, and I'm sure there are some good speakers towards the end of this session which will take you through it. But essentially, you have a partial generative AI pipeline, and then you are finishing it through manual interventions and manual processes. On the game side, we have procedural content only as an AI right now, but we are exploring a couple of studios where we are seeing a couple of studios where the generative content is being live. I personally believe that the narrative-based games will be the first genre of games where the generative AI pipeline could be fully automated and integrated. These are some of the generative AI tools, but more essentially, I think what you should do is you should keep a lookout for websites like Product Hunt, Future Tools, Easy with AI, etc., to keep a view on what tools are currently being the prominent ones and how you could potentially leverage some of these. tools. So just to sum it up, we are in a very good space when it comes to gaming. Overall, $200 billion revenue mark is something that we expect by 2025. Potentially 2027 is something that we could achieve it by. Free-to-play or live services model on PC console is getting more and more traction. Latin America and MENA regions are interesting geographies for you to cater to. Social gaming, UGC and generative AI potentially, and all of them clubbed together could be a very interesting mixture. Payments ecosystem, web shops is definitely something that is getting a lot of traction, and major players globally are getting significant percentages of their revenue driven through web shops. Cross-platform and transmedia are additional ways to engage your users, monetize your users, and get to those users who are traditionally not your platforms. And VR, just by the virtue of making things more immersive, will get a lot of traction. So that's my time, guys. I mean, thank you so much for listening to me. So this here you can get your presentation. So if you have not noted or anything, you can actually subscribe to it or follow my page, and you can actually get a lot of traction, a lot of information that was presented here today. And you can always reach out to me on LinkedIn and WhatsApp. If you have any questions, I'm happy to take them for you. Otherwise,
thank you so much. I mean, it's always useful type. My question is on the topic of cloud gaming. One of the major concerns that I've had with regards to having it run on some hardware somewhere and then stream it to your mobile device or something like that is not only to do with things like latency issues, but also the fact that people who were spearheading major develop on that type of technology have stopped, right? So for things like Google Stadia, for example, they were doing it for like years on end, and they were making significant promises, and there was a huge developer ecosystem that they were even making for it, and then they pulled out, right? And so you have all these developers who, one, have ended up wasting a lot of resources into that type of platform, but two, there's just a lot of technical challenges that come with regards to things like streaming from that type of hardware and stuff like that. So I think for legacy games that works, right? But like for, I think anything with greater fidelity, we're gonna have a significant number of problems. So I think like as a developer, I just wanna know like how much faith could I even put in platforms like these? Or how do we create a robust platform such that it's not going to end up being a business that dies out 3 months later that we're scared of like failing?
Yeah.
Right?
So thank you for that question. I think Stadia, for unknown reasons, got shut down. I'm not sure how or why. But if I look at the hiring trends, if I look at some of the interesting work that Sony is doing, primarily I believe for VR, I think VR is an interesting case on cloud because you are reducing a lot of the hardware tech that you otherwise have to wear unnecessarily. But so cloud is an interesting tech to use on VR side, that's for sure, right? So if you can use it, that's great. The other interesting fact is, I believe now.gg, companies like Antstream, they're doing interesting work with tech. What they build with it and what users do they cater to, that's a very different story altogether. Legacy product, not legacy product, I will not differentiate between the two because at the end of the day, it is a type of users that I'm trying to target, and that's my business model, right? But the larger fact is, I think the technology is scalable. It is sound with 5G coming already into our lives, and with the technology and connectivity already increasing, I believe that the latency issues and other things could be very easily mitigated, and people have done it already. So I don't see it as a major risk. Of course, there could be company risk. The technology is probably sound. There could be company risk. The company is not able to manage, and there will be cash flow issues, and they probably shuts down, or the strategic priorities have shifted, similar for Google, right? I mean, the strategic priorities may have shifted to AI, for instance. I'm not sure. So probably, I will not comment there. So yeah. I mean, technology-wise, I think we are in a good position in cloud where we are seeing good traction already.
On emerging trends, you had mentioned that many games are currently using IPs and live service models
Yes.
to continuously generate revenue.
Yeah.
But since there's a lot of games which are flooding the market right now, this is my personal perception that the quality of games overall has seen a slight decline overall. Like there are, in the previous generation of games, we had games like Arkham Knight, and the recent games have not been able to catch up to that mark. Is there been any studies on that front, like the quality of games?
So, I mean, this is a very, very interesting question, and probably an offshoot to this question I would say is, what is the kind of games that as a developer we should look to build? I think it should be an incremental building from a game perspective. I believe the competition is definitely there. We are not seeing the kind of games that we have eventually seen previously, but the interesting fact is the games that have been developed, they continuously work, they are continuing to work on those games already. So it's not that there is a need in the market for any new game or things like that, but we are seeing interesting games, very, very interesting games. For instance, the Finals. It's an amazing game, right? Created by an indie team, which essentially shows that despite the competition being there, a small indie team can actually break the top charts of Steam. So that's a very interesting and powerful story that innovation and unique gameplay could potentially bring you successes.
My question concerns, so if you want to avoid the growing user concerns with things like microtransaction, you want to be able to get like two big sources of income for a game. First, when you release it at the beginning, and then maybe a DLC later on. In that kind of a situation, and you said we observed a trend in 2023 of DLCs making more money, how consistent do you think this trend is, and how much of a incentive do developers have today to focus on being able to release a DLC when they're developing the original game? Or was 2023 just a like one-off situation because of things like Dead Cells, Cyberpunk, Pokemon, etc., all releasing big DLCs that year?
So it's an interesting question, primarily because DLCs typically would be following new game launches. If the game launches and the new games that are being launched are seeing a lesser and lesser traction, DLCs probably would get lesser traction as well. What we believe truly is that the free-to-play or live services model is here to stay. It's a very safe and consistent way to generate revenues even on PC and console platforms today. And if you can think title, core loop, content treadmill, etc. on the live services model on PC console market, you should typically focus on that. But premium markets, as we have seen, is still the largest market, so we cannot definitely ignore that. But as more and more competition is coming up, it may become harder for the tail end to generate as much revenue as they were originally generating by just launching indie titles on some niche platforms for niche users. So it's an interesting dynamic of how do we get and how do we identify trends and how do we then distribute content. Cool. Thanks, guys.